Portioning food is a key part of preparation. Recall that there are 5 basic steps for any kind of sous vide cooking: preparation, packing, choosing a cooking temperature, cooking for an appropriate time, and then either storing or finishing the food for service. In practice, the order and number of these steps is flexible, such as when and how you portion your food. The most common approach is to portion a raw ingredient into its final shape and size prior to packing and cooking. This is the approach we've taken here with this sable fish. Working this way speeds cooking because the pieces of fish are made small, and the amount of work that must be done during service is also reduced, which makes cooking easier. Another reason to portion prior to cooking is because slicing hot food can be difficult. Even the sharpest blade will tend to stretch and tear delicate foods like this freshly cooked steelhead trout. Not only does this make the fish look less appealing, but it really slows you down during service. Sometimes, however, it's best to cook and then portion an ingredient. Beetroot, for example, is much easier to cut apart after it's been cooked. That's because cooking tends to undo and soften the structure of tough plant foods so that a knife will cut rather than cleave its way through. But whereas cooking softens tough plant foods, raw meat loses its stretch and becomes firm. This is why it's easier to thinly slice through a steak after it's been cooked. And in cases where crispy skin is important, it's always best to do the final portioning and slicing after you've cooked the meat and crisped the skin. But when an ingredient will be served cold, we always prefer to do our final portioning after both the cooking and chilling steps. Why? Because cooking inevitably shrinks and warps the shape of an ingredient. Those sablefish portions that looked exactly the same will inevitably look somewhat different from one another after cooking. If we instead wait and portion after the cooking and chilling, then it's easy to cut identical portions. We take this approach with Chef Step's Salmon 104 dish. We start with a large salmon loin, but slice the final portions only after the fish has been brined, cooked, and chilled. Portioning after cooking and chilling an ingredient can also be applied to foods that are destined to be served hot. This approach is especially useful when the appearance of the food is paramount. A large, awkward cut of meat, like pork belly, can be cooked sous vide until tender and then chilled. Once cold, the pork belly will be firm enough to easily cut into perfect-looking portion-sized blocks. These smaller blocks of meat can be repackaged and quickly reheated later for service. So long as you reheat them at the original cooking temperature, or below it, the final shape of the meat will remain intact. So we recommend that you keep the following in mind when portioning for sous vide. First, cut your raw ingredients down to size to speed cooking. This also avoids the difficulty of slicing delicate ingredients like fish when they're hot and fragile. Second, foods that are sturdy and meant to be served hot are best carved or sliced after they have been cooked. And third, if a food will be cooked and then served cold, or when portions need to appear perfect in appearance, you'll get the best results if you portion after you cook and chill the ingredient.